The Culinary Libertarian Podcast, Episode 6. Hey folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm glad you're here. Happy to be talking to you about food. A couple of things for housekeeping. If you like this podcast and want to help support it, you can visit the culinarylibertarian.com/podcast page, and there you'll find my social media buttons, and you can follow me there. You'll also see the icon for the Patreon support and Bitcoin and PayPal if you want to donate or support me with green. At the Patreon, you can also support for $3 a month and get a Culinary Libertarian bumper sticker. At $5 a month, get a Culinary Libertarian coffee mug. And there are pictures of those at patreon.com/culinary libertarian. Also, if you would go download the podcast on iTunes and give me a rating and maybe write me a review, that'll help move the podcast up, and share it around with your friends. Anybody you know who likes cooking or wants to learn about the things we're talking about, share it around on Facebook and Twitter and help me spread the word, and let's get some people in the kitchen. Hey folks, today I'm talking with Haley Heathman, the author of the fairly newly released e-cookbook, Kill It, Clean It, Cook It, Eat It. It's a cookbook for wild game and how to hunt and obtain and clean and cook your wild game. With that as a topic, it is, I think, important to at least preface some of the discussion is a little frank about cleaning an animal. So if this is a thing that you would rather not listen to, be warned, or at least alerted, that we don't get real gory, but theater of the mind is a funny thing. I try to keep the show language friendly. Haley says a word that you will hear on TNT's The Closer and Major Crimes and several other television shows. It's not a big bad word, but in case this is the thing that you want to monitor little ears who are hunters, the decision is yours. I'm just letting you know. Those caveats aside, this is a very interesting conversation about what it takes to prepare for the hunt, be the hunter, and what do you do once you bag your trophy. I'm here with Haley, and we're going to talk about Haley's relatively new e-cookbook. Well, more than just cooking, it's a everything book for the hunter. So, hi, Haley.
Hey, how's it going?
Going pretty good. Tell us the name of your ebook.
Yeah, it's a digital ebook. It's called Kill It, Clean It, Cook It, Eat It, the complete field-to-table guide to bagging more game, cleaning it like a pro, and cooking wild game meals that even non-hunters will love.
Now, that is, to make a pun, a mouthful of a subject.
Yeah, that is. I just wanted to get the point across that it's a comprehensive, like you said, it's not just a cookbook, although there's certainly that element in there, but it's whole, walk you through the step-by-step process of game, cleaning it, field dressing it, and then cooking it. Because, well, I initially started off with the cooking side of things in mind. That's more of my expertise. I'll throw that out there from the beginning. I'm more of the stronger on the cooking side of things than I am on the hunting side of things. But in order to, especially with wild game, to make good tasting wild game meals, it really does start in the field. So you can't, treat your animal poorly in the field and then expect that you're going to be able to work miracles in the kitchen. It's just not going to happen. I mean, if you gut shot your animal, if you didn't get it a clean shot, if it had a lot of adrenaline and you had to chase it down for a while, or you let it sit in the sun for quite some time and didn't keep it at proper temperature, et cetera, that's all going to contribute to mediocre food in the kitchen, no matter what you do with it. That's what wild game is prone to. I'm kind of going through the whole experience to make sure that you have as good a chance as possible to make phenomenal wild game. And wild game can be phenomenal. It really can. I think people have a misconception about that. And that was part of the reason why I wanted to do this to begin with, because I know even lifelong hunters who would avoid hunting certain types of game, common types of game like turkey. Like, oh, no, turkey's no good. We can't, I mean, it's running around like literally in my front yard. I think you've probably seen photos on Facebook where I've got 24 turkey in my front yard, and I got hunters saying, no, it's no good, whatever. And I'm like, hold my beer.
Yeah, and I have seen those pictures, and I'm sort of in awe and amazed and just sort of licking my chops, waiting for the season to open and looking at the calendar. Come on, time.
Yeah, I think we can just walk out the front door in your underwear and have a turkey supper that night. But that's usually the hens. I think for turkey hunters, the prize, of course, you want your gobbler, you want your boss tom, and so to speak. And so that's a little bit more challenging to get, is to lure in the big one, and that's where the dance begins. I call it in my book a pas de deux, because you're doing a little bit of a subtle dance between you and the boss tom, the gobbler you want. And getting a hen is a little bit easier than getting the tom that you want, with the spurs and the nice fan and everything. So
Makes for nice decoration on the wall.
Yeah.
Before we get into the book too much, I do want to say that I found the humor really well placed, and in some cases, just laugh out loud funny. A lot of the cultural references, some of them topical, some of them just part of the American fabric. I think you really get to just reaching the person who this is for is just someone who wants to go either a seasoned hunter, which I guess is kind of a pun, or the person who's interested in what do I do. And I never hunted. I lived in northern Michigan, surrounded by hunters. Rifle season was kind of an unofficial day off of school because everyone's gone. Surrounded by hunters, I never hunted. And I got a lot of information out of this as far as what do you, the hunter, need to know. That was something that was really impressive. So talk about some of the things that may not be immediately obvious, like setting your rifle, choosing a rifle. I didn't think there was a difference. A gun's a gun, right?
Right. Oh, man. Yeah. So a couple things that you mentioned there. First of all, yes, I wrote this book, and I didn't want it to read like a textbook. I didn't want your eyes to glaze over and feel like you needed to take notes and read, go back and read the paragraph 17 times to understand, what I'm talking about. I wanted it to be a fun, infotaining sort of read. And I'm glad to hear that I accomplished that, and that you found it to be pretty entertaining in that regard. In that same vein, I wanted it to be approachable for many types of hunters. So, if you go to my sales page, when you go to buy the book, the sales page itself is more geared towards beginner hunters, people who might just be getting started, but for whatever reason, you don't want to hire a guide, or, a lot of people they feel intimidated because a lot of people, they've been hunting their whole lives, and like, well, geez, my dad never took me hunting, and there's just so much to learn, and I don't think I could ever go out, and there's such a steep learning curve that I don't know that I could even go out and do it, even if I wanted to. And I think that this takes the mystery out of it somewhat. It gives you a nice primer on everything to expect, and like you said, from everything from the gear that you need, and I had to narrow it down in some areas, so I only focus on rifle hunting or gun hunting, I guess I should say. I don't get into bow hunting or anything like that. It's just I had to narrow the scope in some ways. So yeah, I mean, I go through everything from like the gear to drills that you can do to improve your hunting, and go from there, and that helps make it approachable to the beginner hunter. But I say, if you're even if you're an experienced hunter, I mean, it talks about 6 of the most commonly hunted types of game in North America. So we've got elk, deer, upland bird. I include pheasant and quail, and turkey, duck, and goose. And so for the experienced hunter, for somebody who might want to expand the types of game that they hunt. So if you've already gotten into whitetail, but you think, oh, I've always wanted to try, waterfowl. So that always looks like fun and everything. You can do that. Or if you've been a turkey hunter and want to get into some more upland bird shooting, you can do that. Or if you've already hunted whitetail and you want to go into even bigger game and get you an elk, which is mighty tasty, I show you how to do that as well. So there's a lot of different people who this book would appeal to. And then again, same thing, fine, if you've got all of that, if you're already the experienced hunter, if you hunt many types of game, then that's what the cooking side of things is for. Because like I said, and that was sort of the genesis for the book to begin with, was that I knew lifelong hunters who, I've gone over to their house for a meal, and I'm like, I have to choke down the food. I'm like, wow, that was great, Larry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just not very hungry right now. I had a late lunch and I can't eat anymore. It's like if you only have 3 go-to recipes and you use them over and over and over again, or, believe it or not, if you're not a hunter, a lot of people don't particularly like the gamey flavor of venison or meat, and that's why they get turned off, and they think it's gross. And so you might not think it's a big deal, but everybody else does because they don't like that flavor. And that's, I teach you how to work around that and get around that.
Well, I will say, even one who's eaten plenty of game and cooked plenty of game and worked with farm-raised ostrich, farm-raised antelope, even a farm-raised game bird is going to end, or animal is going to end up having a gamey taste if it's not handled properly. Even a well-experienced diner isn't going to prefer a gamey tasting meat. That makes sense. Nobody wants.
I don't, and that, but I mean, me personally, and I'm still experimenting with some foods. I mean, I still feel like I've nailed venison pretty good, and that's one of the hard ones because it's most common. I said, if anybody's had a bad experience with game meat, it's venison. I mean, we've all had the dreaded, like, livery kind of gross tasting venison where you taste like you're eating rotten eggs or something, And I've kind of, because I've had some good quality meat to work with, but also because like I said, I've kind of mastered it. But and I've done pretty good with my upland bird and the turkey. I think I'm still working out duck and goose a little bit. Goose especially. Goose is a tricky one.
Goose is a tricky one. Yes.
Yeah, and especially when they are wild, not farm raised. Wild duck and wild goose are entirely different animals. I mean, than your farm raised ones. So I mean, the goose breast or the duck breast that you get from D'Artagnan or at your local grocery store is not anywhere the same thing as what you shoot and harvest yourself. The fat content, tougher birds because they're actually using their wings and flying, as opposed to living a life of luxury and
Well, I suppose that would be a relative luxury, but yes, and your point
right,
is
of
valid.
a short life of luxury.
Yeah, well, that brings up an interesting point with the wild animal of any kind versus the farm raised. Even though being the beast that it is going to be at least somewhat predisposed to being gamey flavored if it's overcooked or handled poorly. I worked with a certified master chef who was very much into his game meat. We did venison. We actually used to hang whole pheasants in the walk-in, much to the chagrin of the health inspectors. We hide them, but they were feathers on, head on, complete animals. They would hang in the walk-in for a minimum of a week. Then they'd be clean. And as the butcher, part of that was my job, but it made a big difference in how the meat tasted. Everything got either, especially the four-legged animals, got a brine. So my question for you, as the author of the book with the cooking part, I'm going to put you on the spot, and it's an impossible question to answer. Brine or cure?
Brine. Well, especially with like duck and goose, because there's so much. It's a dark meat, and it's so bloody. Basically, I mean, constantly using it. 100% I brine duck and goose. So I guess in case somebody's not familiar, it's usually some sort of a saltwater saline solution, and you can put some aromatics in there. And I'm not sure if you read in the book, but I actually I read a pretty scientific article about the aromatics not actually being able to do very much because of the size of the molecules not being able to penetrate the flesh, but that's getting into the neck of it. But it's at its heart, the core, it's just like a saline solution that where the salt via osmosis is able to push out some of the blood and tenderize the meat as well. And so it kind of has a dual purpose. And so I absolutely do it with duck and goose. I do it with turkey as well, more to tenderize it, and especially the turkey legs, because that's one of the things that, I was told, oh, you can't eat the turkey legs. I'm like, well, hold my beer. But I don't do it with venison. I don't really see the need, especially with a good quality specimen that you're working with. And the processor that we use, we're up in Montana, they're excellent. They do a great job of, getting enough fat content in there. And if they're doing a sausage and they've got a nice blend of seasonings and everything, you don't need to with backstrap and tenderloin. I mean, really, you can just see, as long as you don't overcook it. Like in the book, rule number 1 one of cooking game. Do not overcook. Do not overcook. Rule number 2. Remember rule
Yeah,
number
it's
1.
like Fight Club.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. With venison and elk is another beautiful, beautiful cut of meat. I mean, I think for that, for your tenderloins and backstraps, there's no need. You can just, part of the beauty of it. I mean, you can literally cut it out. And if you're there in the field, if you're having camp or whatever, and you can fry it up on your camp griddle that night, and it's delicious, Whereas me personally, some people would, but I wouldn't do that with my duck or my goose. Now, we did that with some duck we did shot last year, and it was tender. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was tender enough. It wasn't the texture that threw me off. But again, you kind of just get that like little gamey aftertaste that I don't love, me personally. It's nice and tender, and even though it was seasoned well, you could just still at the back in the finish, you just get enough of that little gaminess to kind of give you the little heebie-jeebies a little bit, like. So I think my style of cooking, and like I said, especially because I'm doing it with the focus of ensuring that normies, non-hunters love it, then you have to do as much as possible to eliminate that gamey flavor, because a lot of people don't like it, including myself. And I I'm a casual hunter. Like I said, I'm not the expert hunter. I'm a casual hunter. I've had plenty of game meat, and I still don't love the gamey flavor. So I do as much as I can to minimize it.
Well, and no one should like the gamey flavor. Personally, do you enjoy the organ?
I've never been a liver person myself, and I don't care for that in any form. I don't like beef liver, calf liver, whatever. I just don't like. I'm not a liver person myself. Other organs I can sort of do, and again, and I haven't worked enough with them, to be honest, to have an opinion. I know that there are lots of things you can do with them. Hank Shaw, he does the hunter, angler, gardener, cook, and he's probably I would say one of the forefathers of wild game cooking. He has some excellent books that teach you how to use all of the organs. The extent that I use organs for, I use them for like my game birds, like pheasant and those other game birds. I'll put them in the stock pot. So I'll when I roast them or something, I'll pan sear them, or you give them a little bit of roast, but then I throw them in the stock pot and make a broth. So at least you're still using them, even if you're not like directly eating them. Hank Shaw's favorite phrase, and he uses it for like more for duck hunting, and he's the real expert at showing how to do it, but he calls it everything but the quack. Learning how to use, literally, I mean, even the feet. I mean, like he said, he'll use the feet, and you can get a nice collagen out of them if you boil them in there with your broth. You can get a nice bone broth sort of collagen, and it's really healthy for you and everything. But he shows you how to use the wings, and which are, especially in real game birds, very, very tough, and how to make them palatable and everything. A lot of hunters, they just breast it out, leave the rest, and that's fine, because especially if you've shot your limit, that's a lot of plucking and chopping to do. So it's okay. But I think, and I mentioned this, that I think you're doing the birds a disservice, and you're kind of making hunters look bad too, if you only ever breast out your bird and you never make any attempt to use any of the organs or render or get the fat out. Duck fat, of course, as is liquid.
Oh my gosh, fabulous stuff.
Yeah, or so if you're only ever breasting out your bird, with your duck or your goose, in particular, you really should make a bit more of an attempt to try and do some more things with it. You don't have to do it every time, but I would say at least 30 to 50% of the time you should be trying to, as opposed to just breasting it out, pluck your bird and use it whole, or saving the legs. And I made a delicious sort of fake confit with pheasant legs the other day. They would work perfect for duck legs as well. It's kind of like a quick, easy fake confit, but still, and it was delicious. I mean, fabulous. But it was something that probably most people wouldn't think to do. They would think, oh, they're no good, they're tough, they're stringy, whatever. So I touch on that, but that being said, I'm still learning as well. And I know that I probably things I could do better with learning how to use organs and stuff and whatever I cook.
When I was at that restaurant with the master chef, so those pheasants would be plucked, and then of course we would take the wishbone out, but leave the cage intact on the breast and leave the skin on, but also lard them, which is very thin layers of pork fat back, tied onto the outside, and then as the bird cooks, the idea is that the fat is going to go into the meat to help make the meat a little bit more tender, because pheasant breast meat has zero fat, and because they've been flying, it's going to be, if you overcook it, man, it's like chewing pencil erasers. And then from the legs, we would braise the legs in a roasted pheasant stock, and by the time those things were done, they were just fantastic. And it took some time to do. And of course, the abilities in a commercial kitchen are often going to exceed the space and abilities for the home kitchen. So it's not really a fair thing to say that, well, just because the restaurant did it, you can do it at home. Well, that's an unfair assessment, and that's not really always true. Because the professional cooks are often going to have a level of experience in the kitchen that most home cooks don't have. If one has the skill and the inclination, boy, braised pheasant legs are worth doing.
Yeah. It took me about 3 hours, I think. And they were good, but it was something that you needed to eat right away. Because my husband had gone on a pheasant hunt with our Brittany, and he does bird hunting, of course, and they brought back like 7 pheasant or so. So that was 14 legs. And anyway, so like I said, I did sort of a quick and easy fake confit, and they were delicious. But if I would have let them sit, like, when it wasn't something that would have been good for the next day, like.
Well, that's a whole lot of eating. Get some friends.
Yeah, but they're thin enough. I mean, there's enough, but it was like, and they were tasty enough, and we didn't have anything else, so it wasn't like eating a whole chicken leg.
So you mentioned a minute ago about hunters who are going to just take the breast meat and not really sure what they're doing with the rest of the bird. That seems to present an ethical issue for hunters and hunting. And I think the idea of killing, certainly amongst non-hunters, would be an issue to discuss as an ethical issue. And I think there are arguments to be made about that and overpopulation. But my concern, my focus of this question is, explain a little bit about what you think is the difference between hunting as an ethical hunter, and then what practices might be unethical practices, and how do you police that? Is that even possible? What do you do when you meet that person who's being disrespectful to the animal?
Well, there are a few different ways that it's addressed. Number one, there are laws, and every state is different, so you have to look them up. But there are laws against it, first and foremost. In most states, I think you have to take a certain portion of your animal. Even with ducks and geese, I think you have to take a wing, or use, it's either a percent. And like I said, it varies state by state. And I'm trying to think what Montana's laws are. And I think it's like you have to use the legs and the wings or something. There's something about it where you're supposed to use a certain amount, and it's kind of like most people actually in reality don't. And that's kind of why I mention it in the book as well. It's one thing with duck and geese, and it's kind of like, okay, I get it. You should probably use like Hangshaw says, everything but the quack, or at least, make an effort. It becomes a serious ethical violation when you start talking about, your larger game animals, like in particular deer, because that's the most commonly hunted type of animal. But I mean, if you really are just, going hunting, taking the backstrap and the tenderloins and, not much else, then that's a waste. Then you really are doing a disservice to that animal, and you really are making hunters look bad. You're trying to basically improve the PR between hunters and non-hunters who think that hunting is cruel, etc. Well, you're not doing us any favors when you're acting in that unethical manner. So, fortunately, I mean, I don't personally know any unethical hunters, and you wouldn't do it. And then there's poachers as well. And poachers poach for various reasons. Some just to get, racks, and some poachers because they got their licenses taken from them for whatever reason. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons for it. You can report people that to be unethical hunters, if you know that they're just, taking select shots, or maybe not humanely killing an animal or something like that. But I would say by and large, it's just a few bad apples that ruin the bunch. I mean, most every hunter that I know is extremely conscientious, very humane, very ethical, very, they want to do justice to the animal. And a lot of people, myself included, you shoot an animal and you'll go pray over it, thank it for its sacrifice, and you want to do that animal justice. And by and large, that is what, the hunting community is about. But you always have the few bad actors that ruin it for everybody.
Well, I think that's true. And I think probably, unfortunately, it's the few bad apples that probably get more of the attention than the people who are being respectful and ethical.
Well, I think part of that too, though, is you have the people who are gonna not like hunting just regardless of whether everybody was ethical or not. For some reason, and I wrote an email to my email list about this recently, and I said, it's funny because the people who are most likely to claim that hunting is cruel or whatever, don't like it and think it's gross and it's icky, are the same ones who are probably out there urging everyone to shop at Whole Paycheck for their organic, all-natural, cage-free, all-natural, humanely certified, treated $17 a pound meat.
Which, by the way, had to be killed to go into a little plastic container.
Right, exactly. And as opposed, and I'm like, well, if you want organic, all natural, humanely treated, cage-free animals, what more could you want than hunting? And it's great, when you can actually see what your food has been eating, and you know that it's out there. You're not eating anything that's been fed antibiotics. You're not eating anything that's, been force-fed, diets or grain-fed diets or anything unnatural. And it's beautiful when you can open it up and you can see its stomach contents, and you can even smell it. You can smell, the berries it's been eating. You can smell the sagebrush and, or the nuttiness, and you already have an idea of what your animal is going to taste like. And it's also good because you can also see it if it is, if there is something wrong with it. If it is a sick animal, you're going to know it. And you're like, oh, there's something wrong with that. I don't know what, but I don't want to eat that now. And so what's more, what could possibly be more organic and humane than that? And yet some people think that hunting is cruel, and I don't understand it.
Well, I don't either, and it's entirely possible that we are not going to understand it.
I think that's 100% possible.
So for those who decide they want to actually experience, and obviously you need to live in the part of the country where this can happen. Living in Upper West Side of New York is not really the ideal place to go hunting for deer. Mm-hmm. So you're going to go hunting deer. And one of the things you wrote about was masking your scent. So tell me, there's a difference between, I remember the difference between masking and something else, and how do you do that, and how sensitive really is the nose of the deer or the elk?
Well, it's probably one of the most surefire ways you can ruin a hunt is if you don't mask your scent. It is very sensitive. They can smell you coming a mile away, and that's why they always tell you want to be downwind from the animal so that they can't smell you out, especially in elk hunting, and they tell you to pay attention to your thermals, because if you're out in the mountains, they've got thermal winds that, are cyclical. So you always know which part of the day you're hunting, which way the thermals are going to be going. Are they going to be going up the mountain? Or are they going to be going down the mountain? And I liken it in my book with the deer hunting side of things is I give an analogy to The Walking Dead. This is one of the more fun ways and relatable ways that I can make the point is, with The Walking Dead, if you've ever watched it back when it was still good, that when there are certain times throughout the seasons where they would be in a seemingly impossible situation where they had the horde of zombies that had totally surrounded them, and there was no way that they could fight their way out, and they were backs up against the wall, literally, almost. Well, what did they do? They found a dead zombie and basically literally covered themselves in zombie guts and blood and smeared it all over themselves, and basically were able to sort of walk through the horde undetected because they smelled just like the rest of them. So their human scent would have given them away, but because they'd basically masked it all, they were able to escape. So similarly, you do that in deer hunting. Of course, you don't have to smear yourself with deer gut, but they have like scent masking shampoos and body washes and deodorants. So because even something like your deodorant or the toothpaste you use in the morning, your minty fresh toothpaste will give you away. So you have to use scent-free deodorant. You have to use a laundry detergent to launder your clothes. You don't want your Gain rainy, fresh laundry detergent to give you away. Because even things like that we can't smell, that doesn't smell anything like that to us, will give you away to the deer. You even have to pack away your clothes in a separate container. Some people will, stand near a campfire to start off with, because and burn some green stuff, because that will also help to mask your scent. And there are lots of other little, techniques like that, but those are the main ones to be aware of when you go out there. Don't go smoke a cigarette or things like that you think are totally innocuous. And I said, well, smokers, y'all smell bad to the rest of us no matter what.
True.
So if you smell bad to humans, you're certainly going to smell bad to deer. Should be an obvious one, but some of the less obvious ones, like I said, brushing your teeth, the deodorant that you use, the detergent that you use, the shampoo that you use, that stays on you, and the deer can smell that. And if especially if you're not staying downwind of your deer, then you're going to get smelled out, and you're not going to see anything for the whole day.
I should have known this living in northern Michigan, but I was a little bit surprised to read and to find out really what I didn't know, that hunting is much more an active sport than just going into the woods and sitting on a box waiting for nature to pass you by. You're talking about going out, in some cases, weeks or months ahead of time, and sort of reading the ground.
Mm-hmm.
What should hunters, people who don't hunt, who want to, what do they need to really understand about a successful hunt?
Well, I'd say, and this goes for most types of game, everything from elk to deer to waterfowl to turkey. Maybe not quite as much with the upland bird, the quail and the pheasant, but especially the ones that I mentioned. The number one factor to success that almost any hunting guide will tell you is scouting. So you have to scout because you have to know where the animals are. It doesn't matter if you're a sharpshooter from 200 yards away and you can cluster a group of bullets, whatever. If you don't know where to find your animal, it doesn't matter. So they say scout, and there's preseason scouting, where you set up game cameras so you can see where the animals might be congregating. You can see watches. You can see if there are repeat bucks or bulls that keep coming through, that they might be forming a pattern between their corridors from where they bed down to where they go for food and where to drink. And it's, scouting is even so important as to not just you yourself, but you get out your topographic maps. You look where it's the most likely place to where they're going to be bedding down, because you have to think, what do they need? They need shelter, just, the basics of what anybody needs: shelter, food, water, and sex, I guess. But that's less part of the scouting thing. But yeah, so you need to find out where they're likely to be sleeping, where they're going to be getting their water from, and what it is they're going to be eating, and at certain times of year. And you get out the topographic maps that shows altitudes, that shows valleys, and gives a little bit of the shape of the land. You talk to your county geologists, you talk to the wildlife commissioners in the areas, and you pick their brains a little bit and find out what they know. So it is, there is that element to it. And, even in things like turkey hunting, where I talk about, well, there are a couple different styles of turkey hunting that you can have, where you have the run and gun style, where you are actually more chasing after the turkey. But the more traditional style is the sit and wait. And even that, it seems like it's a bit of a, like you said, just you go out there and you sit and you hope an animal turns out. But no, again, you have to have scouted the land beforehand to know that the turkeys are even going to be there, like where their roost is up in the trees, and when they're going to fly down, and where the shooting lanes are, and kind of where the radius, they tend to stay within a certain radius, what radius they stay in. So even though it does look like you're just sitting and waiting, you've done enough research in advance to give yourself the best possible chance of success. It wasn't just a random, oh, this looks like a good tree, I'm going to, sit by this or whatever. So scouting is probably the number one factor that's going to lead to hunting success. And that happens, a lot in the preseason. It also happens during the season as well. You're always going out and glassing for animals and things like that, and kind of paying attention to the weather changes. And, there are even seasons within seasons with things like, elk hunting. But yeah, there's always something that you need to be paying attention to. It's very much a strategic sport. And that's one of the things that draws people to it, I think, is that element of strategy and the problem solving involved in it.
Well, and that's something that quite honestly, I just did. Just like people talk about, well, I'm going to go put my tree stand up and I'm going to go hunting. I thought, well, yeah, okay. It just sounds like a reason to go drink beer. And, for some, it might just be a way to get out. And who am I to? I mean, fine, great. So I was reading through the elk hunting part, and when we drove from the East Coast to the West Coast, we stopped in Yosemite, and it was it's a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of land. And lying in the grass, there are some elk, and they're huge animals, and they're really, really pretty. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, okay, that's elk. Very good. So I'm reading through your part about hunting elk, and you're talking about climbing mountains and going into valleys and up steep rock inclines. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I see a big, big problem, because I'm climbing up a really tall, sharp, jagged rock to kill an elk, and I do it. How am I getting it out of there?
Oh, yeah.
There's a level of physically fit that I think is easily overlooked. Being a hunter, especially if you want to get, you're not going to go elk hunting by yourself, I don't think. Elk weighs twice of what you do or I do. So tell me about, how does one do this?
Elk hunting is challenging. I mean, I won't say it's, well, considerably more so than deer hunting. So if all you've ever done is deer hunting and you're trying to make the jump to elk hunting as maybe your first foray into like really big game hunting, yeah, be prepared to work. And I think that's maybe a mistake that a lot of people make. And it's something that I know that a lot of hunting guides get frustrated at, that a lot of the clients that they come, especially if they don't live in mountainous states, if they're living more, in the city, and this is their one foray out, their hunting adventure that they've been saving for a year or two and hoping to draw their tag and everything, they get frustrated because the clients aren't in good enough shape to go after the bulls where they actually really are. And the ones that you see, you were talking about driving through Yosemite, and of course, like Yellowstone, they're everywhere. But they're protected. That's why they know they can just hang out and nobody's going to touch them. You go to where they actually are. I mean, of course, they're wild there in Yellowstone, but I'm talking about where people hunt them. You can't find them. They are, especially the monster bulls. They're not dumb. They're really smart animals. They are in the gnarliest terrain, thick brush, and the shooting it is like 25% of it. Because yeah, you're right. They say the fun's over as soon as you have to start packing it out. That's almost just as much work, if not more, to hunting the animal and shooting it. And yes, you probably would need, I mean, I'm sure people do it, but I wouldn't recommend hunting, a big animal like an elk, 700-pound animal by yourself and having to pack out all that meat on your own. And that's when, when you get into it, I don't even think ethically that you would, I don't know. I don't want to present myself as an expert, but I think ethically, if you're trying to do that on your own, I think that there might be some questions there, because, hunting it on your own and trying to pack out 700 pounds of meat on your own, that's just not going to happen. Well, of course you don't pack out all of it, but I don't know. I think you definitely need a buddy. It's a team sport for many, many reasons. And I touch on that in the book too, talking about the fitness side of things and how to get in shape before the elk season, because you don't want to, especially if this is one of your only few opportunities, you don't want to be so close to getting your prize and yet not be in shape enough to be able to get it. You want to be able to go as far as you need to go to get that bull elk that you're pursuing or whatever. And you don't want to have to, throw in the towel after day 2 because your legs just can't go up another steep incline, or down. Really, down is harder than up in a lot of cases. But either way, your thighs are going to be screaming, your feet are going to be hurting, and it is really an exercise in mind over matter, and having the right attitude from the get-go, because you're going to have to embrace the suck. And I talk about it, and I put it into sort of a military context in my book, where you push through, you have to embrace the suck, but you're going to be richly rewarded at the end, and you'll feel an incredible amount of pride when you complete your mission, basically. And that's what it is. But it's an incredibly physically and mentally challenging sport. It's a big jump above your whitetail or deer hunting. People need to be prepared for it.
I think so. And visualizing all of that work, I decided then and there, I'm not going to be an elk hunter.
Yeah, hey, I mean, elk meat is fabulous, and it is worth it. I mean, it is, some of the people would rank elk up there as in the top 3 types of game meat that you can eat. I actually served it at my wedding. I love elk. Elk is so good. You know, we had a smaller wedding, so it was a choice of elk or a choice of grouper, which is a fish. So, you know, it was you're getting pushed out of your comfort zone. None of this beef or chicken bullshit. You're getting elk or you're getting fish. I'm sorry, but it is fabulous. You know, moose. Apparently, I've never had moose, but apparently moose is phenomenal. Antelope is up there as well. I've had antelope. Antelope is really good. But you know, those are probably some of the top 3 best game meats you can have. So it is worth it. I mean, elk meat is totally worth it. In addition to, of course, if you want a trophy or whatever, but you know, the meat itself, it's, you know, you can't beat it really.
I don't know that I've ever had it, but I have had farm raised antelope because in the restaurant we needed some chain of custody proof. And that was how we did it, was we got farm raised, but even the farm raised antelope was just spectacular, so delicious. Really enjoyed it. So it's been many years, but still a fond memory of what really good game meat tastes like without tasting gamey. All right, well, let's wind it up here a little bit. I wanted to ask you one quick question about flavor combinations, and then I realized if you've never eaten wild turkey or wild venison, how would one know? And this is a tough question to answer. How do one know how to flavor match? And what I'm thinking about is if the bird or the animal is eating lots of berries, there's a reasonableness to make something berry-ish to go with it. So looking for some compatibility. In 2 minutes or less, do you have some sort of easy, handy, this is the way to flavor combine? Are they going with color of meat, or what do you have?
Yeah, with things like your big game like elk and venison, you know, you're always going to have an earthy flavor to it. I say earthy as opposed to gamey, or you could be both, but there's always going to be that sort of like earthy flavor to it, even if it's not particularly gamey. What I recommend for things like elk and venison, you want to brighten it up a little bit. You don't want to muddy it down with like a heavy brown gravy or something like, you know, you want it to give it some zip. So berries and fruits, tart, balsamic glaze. I did a venison backstrap with a creamy horseradish sauce, something that's going to be zippy to counterbalance sort of the earthiness that you get intrinsically in the meat. And I include a lot of recipes that do that in my book. As far as things like turkey and upland bird, it sounds cliche, but it all kind of tastes like chicken to me. So I think with those types of a game, for me, it's not so much about masking the gaminess. I don't particularly find them very gamey. You're more fighting with textures there and making sure you don't dry it out, because there's so many, you know, there's so little fat on it and it's a tough muscles. So it's more about the texture and trying to fight the leathery, stringy flavor than it is about, or the texture than it is about masking the flavor. And so it's not, so with that, you can do basically anything with it that you can do with chicken, any flavor combinations. I mean, that's what I basically do. You treat it like a big old field chicken, but, you know, you go back into certain other techniques like we talked about at the beginning, maybe brining it to tenderize it a little bit. Or I talk about marinades as well, especially if you have a lot of them. I make a big batch of marinade. You can marinate them overnight or put them in Ziploc bags and freeze them. And you have an easy, ready go-to meal. Just defrost it and cook it. And it's already been, you know, marinated in the flavor. It'll be tenderized and everything. So that's really what you're fighting with there. So, you know, with your upland bird type game is more the texture thing than the flavor thing. And you can basically do anything with it that you can do with chicken.
Right, and you had an interesting a turkey tetrazzini, which would not be something I would have thought of. So that was an interesting take on an old classic.
Yeah.
Excellent. Very good. Well, I appreciate your time today. And this was the beauty of the internet in 2018. So yeah. I'm going to put a link for your book up on the show notes page, and I haven't figured out what episode this is going to be, but we'll be ready to go. And do you also have a website you want to share, or is that the same thing?
Yeah, it's going to be the same thing, but it's huntandcookwildgame.com, so that'll take you to the sales page. I know you're going to be chomping at the bit. You don't have to read all the sales letter. Just go to the buy button and buy it. and it comes with bonus cookbook, audio interviews with expert hunting guides, and audio transcripts. And it's really a great value for any type of either the beginner hunter, the experienced hunter, or somebody who just wants to learn how to cook wild game better. And it speaks to all those audiences, and it's a really great product.
Excellent. Well, I liked reading it, and I appreciate your time. Go buy her book. It's almost Thanksgiving. Go hunt your own turkey.
Thanks, Dan. I had a really great time chatting to you.
Well, good. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for today. If you are a hunter or just a carnivore and are interested in some ways to add flavor to your meat, either in marinades or in rubs, then visit culinarylibertarian.com/savory spice. I have 9 or 10 reused ice cream containers filled with all manner of spice blends from Savory Spice. They make the blends that I would make if I made spice blends. I do at home, but I don't sell them. These guys are top-notch, excellent quality stuff. You're going to love their product because I love their product. I will see you next week. Don't forget, give me a like and a review on iTunes. Bye.